members of Parliament will begin a two-day debate on President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address this afternoon. The President used his address last week to unpack his plans for the country and to assert South Africa's position on the global stage. Now, there was mixed reaction to his address. This debate, starting at 2 o'clock this afternoon, comes amid persisting international pressure on South Africa from US President Donald Trump, who has cut off aid to the country in protest of South Africa's Expropriation Act and our position as a country against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Let's unpack what we can expect this afternoon. Joining us in studio is Newzroom Afrika's Qaanitah Hunter, and it's a great pleasure having you here with us in studio, Qaanitah. There's been a lot of reaction to the President's speech, but I think one thing that stands out is that it wasn't, I'm an African. There was no prose from Thabo Mbeki. There was no plant from one of our finance ministers. It really was very much a report back from the President on what we've done over the past year and the projects that will continue this year.
The President has in the past, Michelle, postured a lot and gave us those type of philosophical speeches. But the room didn't demand it. The atmosphere in South Africa as well as in the world could not expect that level of highbrow analysis or picture from the President. He had to get down to business very quickly. And what was that business? One, you had troops that were killed in the DRC, possibly at the hand of Rwanda, and you had this escalating tension there. And South Africa's role in the Democratic Republic of Congo could not be ignored, and it's something that he had to deal with very quickly as he addressed the nation. 14 soldiers were killed. The second thing is that he could not shy away from the elephant in the room, and that was the development around US President Donald Trump and the crosshairs South Africa faces with regards to the Trump administration, the cutting off of aid, and the real human consequence of it, which is South Africa's HIV/AIDS program. And so that was the second element. The third is economic growth. The entire government of national unity is hinged on the success of whether the government can grow. The President projecting, an optimism that says we could have 3% growth, as economists are saying. We're looking to between the 1.3 to 1.5% ratio of growth this year. But he had to have a plan that says, I am presenting an outlook that says 3% growth for the country, and this is why I believe that's going to happen.
Very interesting as well. It's the first SONA, State of the Nation address, under the coalition government. And I wonder what kind of impact that will have. I think we saw a bit of an impact on the commentary after the State of the Nation address. Journalists will grab politicians as they leave the venue, and there's a lot of strong opinions, and there were some. Do you think that the debate starting today for these next 2 days will be softer in tone because of the GNU?
I think that it will take a different characteristic, whereas we are used to seeing the Democratic Alliance, for example, being completely and utterly opposed to anything the President says or announced in previous State of the Nation's address, where John Steenhuisen is addressing the House today as Minister of Agriculture in the Government of National Unity. And he described the President's speech as perfectly diagnosing South Africa's problems with a focus on jobs and growth, which I think is very different to how they postured before. I think what the DA, for example, is going to try to do is center the discussion around their areas of focus and where they have influence in the executive, and to claim victories where they can. And I think that they're going to sort of try to walk a delicate balancing act between not being overly, admiring of the President, but at the same time not being overly critical. So it's that balancing act. But you're going to see from parties like the MK party, which will speak directly after the ANC's chief whip opens the debate this afternoon. They said there's nothing new in the President's speech, and they basically framed Ramaphosa's address to the nation as being completely dislocated from reality. So you'll see that coming through. But it was very interesting to hear from people like Rise Mzansi's Songezo Zibi. Obviously, he's new to this type of debate, coming in and says this is probably one of the strongest State of the Nation address presented by the President. And so it'll be interesting to see how much of the debate is constructive. And I think that there's an appetite, Michelle, for the debate to focus on substantive issues versus the posturing. I think South Africans are growing tired of that, and the election results was indicative of this, kind of open political sparring that means very little for what the future entails for South Africa.
Absolutely. One thing that the president did talk about, and he does mention the National Development Plan, and our presidents before have done so since its inception. But one thing Cyril Ramaphosa talked about was building a capable state.
Yeah.
And I wondered whether he could have expanded more on the idea of what it's going to take to build a capable state. We've talked about professionalizing the public service, for example, but he didn't talk about the NPA or the Justice Department granting the NPA unfettered access to the state capture inquiries files as an example of trying to build a capable state by addressing corruption.
Let's rewind to 2018. That was the core focus of President Cyril Ramaphosa's multiple addresses to the nation, that he's going to build a capable state. That's what he was going to set South Africa apart. He hasn't done it in 6 years. And the question is, in all of the things that he announced, there's very little how, and I think that's going to be the center of the debate, is that you speak about this transformation fund that is going to have 20 billion rand a year for the next 3 to 5 years. How are you going to do that? You're talking about the digitization of the Home Affairs visa process, for example, the national digital identity. All of these things are incredible initiatives and are long waited. We really need these developments as a country, and they're good initiatives. But what the president lacks often is the how, spelling to the nation that he's going to do this and this is how it's going to do this. And I think that's where projects, initiatives that the president has announced in the past fell through the cracks, because there isn't a sustainable plan. And so his response to the debate will be important to say, what are the focus areas? What was he grilled on by MPs? For example, when he talks about sending envoys across the world to position South Africa in terms of the criticism from the Trump administration and where South Africa sees itself as the president of the G20 or chairing the G20 this year, how are you going to do that? What does that look like? Yeah. Who's going to be part of this team of envoys?
Shouldn't you go yourself?
Shouldn't you go yourself?
Yeah.
And so these are things, and that's why it's very important to pay attention to not only the posturing from political parties, but the specificities of the debate and how he responds to it, versus whether he just simply responds with broad strokes.
Absolutely.
Yet again.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the how and there's the deadline, right? Another issue that the president addressed, and I believe that the term he used was, we're going to fix water once and for all. I'm probably paraphrasing just a little bit. But that term once and for all stuck in my mind. And it's funny because today we've got multiple headlines of water crises in the Eastern Cape. We've got Durban, we've got Hammanskraal, years-long water crises. There's also a deadline for the eradication of pit latrines in the country set by the DA's education minister for the end of March. We've just heard the Education Department in the Eastern Cape tell us they will not meet that deadline. So water and sanitation, the president says he has a plan, again, scant on the how and the when.
And just that broad strokes, that we fix the electricity load shedding problem.
That's
so
exactly,
trust us, we will fix this.
Right.
And the problem with that is that there's little to hold him accountable against, because he hasn't really spelled out what is the minister going to do differently. What have you instructed? Yes, the president says that there's going to be this team that's assembled that's going to be focused on that. Where's that team going to reside? Is it different from the infrastructure and water team that's currently sitting in the presidency? What resources are going to be allocated? When we look to the budget, when the finance minister presents his budget to the nation in a few days' time, in a few weeks' time, how will that priority by the president be realized in what actually matters, which is in rands and cents? And so I think that this debate, if anything, opposition party leaders should really stay away from the empty theatrics of politics and really zoom in on issues.
Please, we're all asking very nicely to stay away from the theatrics. Qaanitah Hunter, thanks for coming into studio. Some excellent analysis there of what you and I need to be looking out for once the debate gets underway, and we look forward to talking to you perhaps for some post-debate analysis as well. Qaanitah Hunter with Newzroom Afrika.